with Radio Free Europe. So she's had a really, really interesting career and has been a lot of places to see where people are, and support people who are struggling around the world. Radio Free Europe was to support Eastern Europe during the division between Germany and West Germany and East Germany. And for my German students, she also was a German student in high school and studied German in college as well. So welcome, Melissa. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Heather. Danke, Heather. Und hallo alle, die Deutsch sprechen. Guten Tag aus Genf in der Schweiz. And hello to everybody else. And congratulations to all of you who are learning German. Actually, it's a really important language these days. I think it was in the US falling a bit out of favor for a while, but I can tell you Germany is the power of Europe right now, and all over Europe, people are clamoring to learn German again. So it's back in fashion. So I'm very glad to see that there are German students and that Heather is of course, that Heather is your teacher. So it's quite ironic that we're two cousins, one who grew up in the East Coast, one who grew up in California, hardly ever saw each other, and both happened to study German. So anyway, I would just Heather said you're very interested in what's going on, particularly here in Europe right now with the refugee crisis. I think you probably, I don't know if you watch the news at your age, but I know that you access a lot of news via social media. And I assume that you've been seeing that there has been, thousands and thousands of people arriving on the shores of Europe, trying to find safety here, and have been met with a lot of chaos and real fragmentation depending on where they've landed. I mean, the other important thing to tell you is that a lot of people have died. So we say about 400,000 people have arrived on the shores of Europe this year. And unfortunately, what is our number? Let me give you I want to be accurate here. The number of deaths is approaching 3,000. So I think it's at about 2,900. And how do people die and why do people die? I mean, maybe this could be a little interactive. Will I be able to hear people, Heather?
Well, let's try. Darren, you want to say hi?
Does anybody know why so many people have drowned crossing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you have an answer, they go, why have so many people drowned crossing into Europe? Go ahead, Darren.
So one of the things that I learned that I heard from hearing from the news is that pirates have been forcing these refugee boats to go into the choppy waters, and these are boats that are overfilled, that are not designed to handle that many people, and in these choppy waters that many of them have capsized, and that's how these people have drowned.
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate. Basically, what has emerged from probably the desperation of people, most of whom are, and this is the new dynamic, are fleeing from wars. The Syria war is the biggest driver, but also Iraq and Afghanistan. But then there's also Somalia in Africa, Eritrea, which is a very repressive country. And then there are people who are fleeing poverty. You see that a lot in the United States, a lot, with Mexicans coming. That's the difference. Those are considered migrants or economic migrants, also important for societies, but not protected under international law. So the difference is that if you're a refugee and you're fleeing, countries have an obligation to allow them to seek asylum in your country. And they are forbidden by international law to return you to your country, where you would face death or perhaps be put in jail. And so the answer to that question is there's been a terrible business that has been started up, and this business is basically exploiting people who have no other way to get to Europe but to take these awful boats. They are charged exorbitant sums of money, depending on the passage. Right now, the most popular route on the boats is between Turkey and Greece. And it's only a few hours on the boat, but it costs per person up to about between $2,000 and $2,500. So it's extremely expensive. And they've already had to take other smuggler routes by land to get there, and they'll have to take more. So sometimes people say that for a whole family to get to Europe from Syria, it can cost them up to $20,000, $30,000. Probably their life savings. And unfortunately, because the smugglers are so profit hungry and care almost nothing about human lives, as he just said, they stuff people into the boats, way, far too many people, under the hull, in the middle, on the top, shoulder to shoulder and feet to feet, and they very often just abandon the boats, and they say, here's a GPS and there's land. And the route from Libya to Italy can take days too, so this can be extremely dangerous, very scary. Sometimes it isn't even the weather that causes the capsize. Sometimes it's just that the boat is unseaworthy, there are too many people on it. People might spot a rescue boat and panic, and then they capsize. So it's very, very tragic. There are rescue boats out there, but they're probably not enough. So this is a situation we have in Europe, a very dangerous journey. Just a couple of, I mentioned the origins, that people are leaving because of wars. One of the key questions, and then I'm not going to talk too much because I'd like to answer your questions, is also why so many more people are fleeing today. And just to look at the big picture, there are now 60 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes. And just, it's a very big number to think about, but 1 year ago, we announced that there were 50 million. So in 1 year, it was just over 50 million, almost 10 million people fled from their homes in the year between, in just 1 year. And another figure just to get you to think about, on a single day, like every day, 42,000 people will flee their homes. So today, that's what's going to happen. Sorry, not 42,000 people. Yes, 42,000 people. That is correct. 42,000 people somewhere in the world will be forced to flee from their homes. So this is creating a situation where people are desperate to find countries that will take them in. And that's why you're seeing this growing movement. Most of the Syrians have fled to the neighboring countries, but those countries are very overburdened. So maybe I'll stop there and take questions, and we can get into more of a discussion.
Thank you. We have another student here.
Hello, my name is Moki, and my name is Moki. So my question is, since this is a really big crisis and many people know about the problems, why aren't charities getting enough money to donate to the crisis? And also, why is the UN not getting funded enough for this?
That's a very good question, and in fact, I was just doing an interview in the studio, and that was one of the points I was trying to make. One of the reasons people are leaving and coming to Europe is, I mentioned that neighboring Syria, there are 4 million refugees, and my organization is in charge of taking care of them, because the countries that host them, Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey, they're very overburdened with all of these. We have not been receiving enough money to give these people an even decent life. We don't understand why. We believe it would be, and I think now Europe has woken up to the fact that there hasn't been enough aid provided to the organizations that are helping refugees, the UN. And now they're saying, oh, now we need to start paying more. They have been paying a lot because the needs keep going up and up, but it just hasn't been enough. So if you compare like humanitarian budgets to military budgets, I mean, the difference is night and day. So, what we always say is, if you great powers of the world are unable to prevent the wars that are driving so many people from their homes or to stop them, the least you can do is help the victims. So, I mean, it's a very good question, and I wish I had the answer because it's very short-sighted. It's also short-sighted because, and I just want to talk about education because a lot of you are students. Well, you're all students. The refugee populations are far too few are in school. So, for example, around the world, refugees only 50% are in primary school, and only 1 in 4 are in secondary school. And I just say this is also so short-sighted because the kids are the future of the war-torn country that they will return to. And if you return those kids without any education or skills, you might be in a situation where you just perpetuate the war and not, you would have the chance as the international community to educate, to train, and the students would go back as kind of agents of positive change and of rebuilding and reconciliation. But anyway, that's my little rant on education. So there are a lot of problems with this picture. And yeah, I wish I had more good news.
Thank you.
Wow, you guys are prepared. Huh?
Oh, hello, my name's Ben. And I was wondering if there are certain areas or countries that are getting more refugees than others, and if there's anything we can do to help out there.
Yeah, well, that's also a very good question. And I think the perception is when you turn on the televisions that all the refugees are coming to Europe. Well, in fact, 86% of the world's refugees are in developing countries. So, and mostly the countries that are neighboring the conflicts. So, yes, if they were better helped there, they would be less likely to move on and seek more refuge. So, again, for the Syria situation, the most are in Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. Turkey has 2 million refugees from Syria. And Lebanon, which is astonishing, has 1.2 million, but their population is only 4 million. So when I travel to Lebanon and I go to towns and villages, and there are sometimes more refugees in the town than there are locals. So it's really a situation that's not recognized enough, the contribution these countries are making, and they're definitely not getting enough support. So, I mean, I just think, learn about them, learn about those countries, learn about Kenya that's taken in so many Somalis, or Pakistan, or even Iran, who've welcomed so many Afghan refugees over years and have done their best to support, but also have received very little help from the international community. Thanks for the good question.
Hi, I'm Ken.
Hi, Ken.
My question is, how heavily do these migrant populations affect the native country's economy and native labor force?
Sorry, can you just repeat it because the sound isn't that great?
How heavily do these migrant populations affect the native country's economy and labor force?
How heavily did you say does?
Yeah.
Do the migrant populations affect the economies?
Yeah.
Of the neighboring countries or the countries they're refugees in?
The native countries and the labor force there as well.
The native countries?
Yeah. You mean the refugee countries? No, like the countries they're going to.
Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, and again, I have this battle with the media, so I'll say it also with you that we refer to them as refugees because they're protected under international law, that they have the right to seek asylum, they have the right to seek refuge, and they cannot be returned. Whereas migrants are people who leave voluntarily, mostly for economic reasons, and if they were to be returned, they would have the protection of their government. That's the difference. So refugees and how they affect the economy. Well, in many ways, they could be a burden on the economy and the infrastructures, but in many ways, we have seen that refugees have been an infusion of economic strength if the country actually allows them to work. And this is one of the biggest problems, that many countries don't allow them to work. They think the refugees are going to come in, we'll open our borders, we'll let them stay there, but it's temporary and they're going to go home. But what happens very often is, like, the average time a refugee stays a refugee is about 15 years. And so that when we see that when a country allows refugees to contribute to the economy, that there's quite a boom. But there's a lot of fear. You know, you hear it in the US all the time, that they're going to steal our jobs and they're going to, you know, basically take our jobs. And that's what politicians use to kind of keep them from working. But yeah, so it's a bit complex question. It's a very, very good question. I think if you look at what's happening now in Germany, there are a lot of signs that the industry in Germany is really happy about the Syrian refugee influx, because there are lots of qualified professionals among those refugees, engineers and people from technical professions, and there are a lot of doctors too, and nurses and people with lots of skills. So that's, you know, what you see is kind of all spectrums of the society that's on the run. And in countries like Germany, where the birth rate is very low, there's actually a real need for an infusion of workers. It's just that sometimes the politics doesn't want to admit that. Thanks a lot for your question.
Hi, my name's Ayush.
Hi.
Hi. So recently on the news, there's been an emphasis on children more than adults about this topic. So my question is, what are we doing to help adults and during this time?
Yeah, well, we try not to, I mean, we try not to, you know, say one should be helped over the other. In fact, sometimes we're saying what the question we're getting more than the question you just asked is, what are you doing for the women and children? Because actually, refugees, if you look at the general worldwide refugee population, women and children are about 75%. So, so anyway, but adults, you know, we try to help everybody equally, and you know, it's look at also people individually and what they've gone through. So sometimes, you know, we have to support the adults so that they can support their children. Really, I think probably some of the pictures you've seen is maybe in order to you know, raise empathy. News organizations and organizations like ours tend to show the children because, frankly, people are more sympathetic to children and they are less afraid of children. And it also just shows that actually these are people who are families who are on the run. And I think it kind of surprises people to see these little young kids on these boats and taking these long journeys. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Another question coming.
Hi, my name is Brennan.
Hi, Brennan.
Would you say that European countries benefit by the route to Europe being so difficult? Because technically, the Europeans don't have to provide asylum until they actually reach the shores.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. And a lot of people are asking, why can't people apply for asylum in the embassies of those countries in, you know, where they're coming from? this was something that the European Union, I think most countries in the world have made that decision. And in fact, you know, when you go to the airport and you check in at the check-in counter and you're going to a foreign country, do you know what they're looking for when you show your passport? A visa. They want to see a visa in there. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to travel. So basically, the world has kind of delegated to the airline check-in personnel their border control. And if you don't have a visa, you can't get on an airplane. So, and this is obviously, this is being criticized because the only alternative for many refugees is that they have to take these, fuel the smuggler business, take these dangerous routes, risk their lives. There are a few other alternatives that we promote and that we have programs for. One is called resettlement. And the U.S. has the largest program there, and that is where we identify refugees and refugee camps and refugee settlements who are particularly vulnerable, like victims of torture, women who've been raped, families with, you know, that have gone through lots of difficulties or have severe medical issues and can't really be helped in the countries that they're in. And then we match them with what so-called resettlement countries. And if we do a screening, and then let's say the US does the screening. And if successful, then that family is allowed to resettle and take an airplane and arrive in a town or a city in the United States or in countries of Europe, and they will then be helped to restart their lives. We think this should be hugely expanded. The other possibility, which needs to be expanded, is family reunification. There are lots of families, diaspora around the world, and usually the only way you can bring a family member is if it's a really close family member. So what we're saying is, like, say you had a Syrian family living in your neighborhood, and that family wanted to help an uncle. I mean, or maybe you've heard that you saw the case of the little 3-year-old boy, Aylan Kurdi, who drowned on the shores of Turkey. Well, his family had an application with Canada for family sponsorship. And for some bureaucratic reasons, that application didn't work. And so his family felt they had no other alternative but to take that boat. And we know what happened next. So that's why we say, let's try to be more flexible and allow, in a time of war, in a time of extreme need for Syrian refugees, to make that possible, that families like the family of little Aylan Kurdi could be sponsored, be reunited with family members in a safe country where the family says, you don't need to do anything. We'll take care. They'll have a place to live, and we'll get them on their feet. So that's a long answer. All of these questions are very complex, but you're all asking all the right questions, I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
So my question is, will the refugees eventually be able to become European citizens?
Generally, once they have been in a country for about 5 years, they can apply to become citizens. So with some countries, it's faster than others. You know, asylum is generally based on, you know, you seek asylum for the period where your country is at war, and it is possible. And most refugees actually would prefer to return, and many do, even if they could stay. But it really depends from country to country. But generally, in European countries, in the United States, if you've been granted asylum, you will eventually become a citizen. Any other questions?
We do have more, Melissa.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Gianna.
Hi, Gianna.
So I have a question. With the flood of refugees into Arab countries now making up a significant percentage of the population, do you foresee it leading to instability and potentially even a civil war similar to Jordan's Black September?
I think that this is something that there's some real fear-mongering politicians and kind of foreigner-hating groups who are propagating this message. I don't think that there's any danger of that with this number. This is like Europe has half a billion people, and we've seen now 400,000 people arrive. So and actually, it's not only Muslims arriving; it's Christians and as well. But the vast majority are Muslims. For many, this is there are countries in Europe that do not have significant Muslim populations. So I just think the only danger is that there could be cultural integration issues, and that absolutely needs to be met head on, really quickly. Otherwise, you do have situations like we have in France, where there are communities of people who are, and it doesn't matter what the community is or what the religion is, any community that is then feels unaccepted and not integrated, there is the danger that they can become extremist. But in this case, if the country is determined, get the kids in school, help learn the language, retrain, train, accept qualifications, get people in the workforce. I don't think anyone coming to Europe as a refugee has an intention of, starting a war or creating tensions or committing acts of terrorism. Some people are saying, oh, there are all these ISIS terrorists among them. And I've heard that from certain US politicians too. And frankly, what we say is actually these people are fleeing from ISIS. They're not, and in Europe, 30,000 Europeans went to Syria to fight for ISIS. So it's kind of the other way around. So.
I was kind of referring more to, say, Lebanon, where they've taken in, like you said, over a million, even with only 4 million population.
Well, absolutely, there is. It's very strange there because Lebanon, because of what happened in their history with the Palestinians and their own civil war, there was a refusal to allow any refugee camps. So there are no refugee camps for Syrians, and their Syrians are not allowed to work. So actually, instead of allowing them to integrate, to work, by doing this, in our view, they increase the chances that there could be instability because there's so much frustration. So yes, there's a very delicate balance in Lebanon between Sunni and Shia Muslim and Christian, and they're very concerned that if that balance is disrupted, that conflict could erupt again. So yeah, absolutely. It's very close to Syria. It's right on the border. There's a lot of tension, and we're worried that it could explode too at some point. Thank you.
Hey, Melissa. So
what's up?
My name's Darren, and so one of the things that ran my mind when you mentioned with ISIS that the Syrians are fleeing from them, isn't it very much possible that the ISIS could be infiltrating not necessarily the refugee camps, but such as the case that the United States is taking in refugees? Can ISIS be posing as refugee people trying to come in?
I think that is extremely unlikely because, first of all, we have a very strict screening process for even who becomes a refugee in the first place, where we do not, if you are a combatant in any way, you do not get refugee status. And then we have another screening for who gets submitted for resettlement to the United States. And then the process that the US imposes is, especially after 9/11, it is so stringent and so thorough of screening people who are coming for resettlement that, and it takes almost 2 years, that frankly, I think it's pretty impossible. If there are any ISIS people who wanted to come to the US, I don't think this would be a very smart way of doing it. I mean, it wouldn't be an easy way of doing it. It would be extremely difficult, extremely lengthy, and I'm sure that there will be much easier ways, frankly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But you're right to ask that question, because that's what a lot of Republican senators are saying.
Hi, my name's Mariah. So how have the images in the media affected the reactions of the European citizens, and is that having an impact on the changing government policies?
So how have the images of what?
Of people fleeing,
Of people fleeing?
like Syria.
How have the images of people fleeing, sorry, the acoustics are not great. How have the images of people fleeing affected?
The reactions of the European citizens, and
Yeah.
is that having an impact on the changing in the government's policies?
I think so. I mean, I think television images and photographs are extremely important in shaping public opinion. And so you have, on one hand, because of the chaos, the images of kind of bedraggled people fleeing in large groups of, you know, angry people and big crowds. This scares public opinion. Then, by contrast, you have the image of little Aylan's body washed up on the shore of Turkey, and that was a game changer. That was a huge, huge, huge game changer. Everybody saw in that little boy their own child, and really recognized that these are not like economic migrants or terrorists. These are children and women and families, you know, coming. When the story came out, and, you know, he had a name, and it turned out they were fleeing from Syria, and you know, this, I think it really just changed the mindset of everybody. There's been a big development too, which is the civil society in Europe, the general public, who came out, first of all, to help refugees in numbers that were just astonishing. I mean, I was at the Vienna train station for many days, and where thousands of people were coming, and there were more volunteers sometimes than there were refugees, just people. And they were all saying, we do not want a fortress Europe. And they were holding up signs, refugees welcome. This sent a huge signal to the politicians that actually this kind of closed rhetoric, we don't want this. It hasn't worked in countries like Hungary and in other countries, but it has in many others, like in the UK. In Germany, the leadership, either they recognized that the people wanted to be welcoming, or they just, it's a real example of when you're a courageous leader and you take a risk and you say, you know what, this is the right thing to do, that you're going to get the people to follow you. And you are going to become, Angela Merkel right now is like the hero of the Middle East. I mean, so I think, you know, a lot of things, I know this is a longer answer to your question, but definitely the images can work both ways. They can fuel fear, but they can also drive empathy. And my job is somebody in charge of communications. Of course, we use images that will build empathy, and of, you know, individuals, of people who you can identify with, who will build bridges. We tell their stories, people, you know, we think others can relate to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, we have 2 more questions for you.
Excellent. Okay. I'm very impressed with the quality of the questions.
It's Mohit again, and my question is with the Hungary crisis. So recently, Hungary said they were in a state of crisis because of the refugees coming in. Why exactly are they in a problem because of them? And is this affecting, like, is this giving European countries now a second thought of accepting refugees now?
Well, Hungary is kind of acting on its own. There's nobody in the European Union who told Hungary to build a fence. It made a decision that it did not want to accept refugees. Basically, from the beginning, Hungary was calling them all illegal immigrants, economic migrants. It said that they were protecting the borders of Europe, but frankly, nobody asked them to do that. And today they've sealed their border. It's closed. And I think most of Europe has been quite shocked that Hungary was doing this. I just posted on Facebook an image of 1989 when the wall came down, and the foreign ministers of Austria and the foreign minister of Hungary with wire cutters cutting the wall that was the Iron Curtain between the 2 countries. And today I posted another picture where you can see a line of police, the wall, and then on the other side, a huge crowd of refugees. Maybe Heather can show it to you because it's just up on my Facebook now. And those pictures are just extremely shocking to see. I think it's shocked Europe a bit to see how quickly history has been forgotten. Yeah, so I mean, what you're seeing is a huge difference, and this refugee crisis has exposed a lot of divisions in Europe. So it's not, I think that what people hoped would be the European Union is kind of like the United States, but what you have are a lot of individual countries who say, I'm going to do it my way. I don't care what okay, the European rules are one thing, but my country comes first. And that's what we're seeing here.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa. I'm sorry, you haven't met me yet.
Hi.
But, I have a simple but powerful question. How can we help?
That's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that just struck me from talking to all of you is just educating yourselves but other people is just so critical, because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much lack of understanding about what is a refugee and what they're entitled to, what their rights are. And so, I mean, one thing, I mean, I would look at first as a citizen of the United States and see, what one can do. You can start at the community level to see if there are programs to help resettled refugees. You can also look at the US's policy. You remember it wasn't very long ago when all of these children were coming across from Central America, fleeing really terrible violence. And some of the treatment wasn't great. And actually many were also deported. So these kinds of things as young people to look at and say, is this what we really want in our own country? And then, I think there's a lot one can get involved in on social media, groups that are working for refugee causes. For this specific situation, I really, obviously one can donate to UNHCR, but there are lots of groups in Europe that are amazing. But lots of grassroots groups where young people are getting involved, volunteering to help teach English or German or whatever the language is. People who are offering rooms in their homes under this program. It's kind of like, we call it like the Airbnb for refugees. It was started by a young university students in Germany, and it's really expanding. You can look at it up online, Refugees Welcome. Yeah. So, and then there are different organizations, but so there's the community level, there's the kind of political organizing level, and then there is the, if you want to help abroad, looking at what kind of groups are out there. So I guess there are three ways. You involve yourself locally, you get involved politically, or you give money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think our period is just about done, Humorless.
Right.
I wanted to thank you for being here with us again, and to ask you, is it okay if the students, for further information, follow you on Facebook or follow you on?
Of course. Yeah. Excellent.
And I will share that information with all the students. There's students from a couple different classes here. I don't know if I mentioned that to you before, but there's a couple different.
Oh, good. Okay.
As well as international relations and AP World History. So,
Well, an impressive group of students.
thank you. We're proud of them.
Yeah.
So I will wish you a good night. Gute
Thank
Nacht. Schlaf schön.
Schlaf schön. Alles Gute, alle. Und ja, wir bleiben in Verbindung. Bye bye.
Just
This Google Hangout worked great too.
sure thing. Yeah. Thank
Oh. Bye bye.
There's some books over here if you want more information.
Awesome, Patty.
Some places. So you can check books out and more information.
Thank you. Thanks to Ms. Stein for letting us use the library like this.